I mean, would you describe this as a win-win, helping Eskom on the one hand with its debt, but also then there is that condition that no public servant is retrenched as part of Eskom's restructuring?
Yes, look, for us, I mean, solving our problems is about coming together as government, as business, as labor, and community. These are problems which affect all of us. Eskom is our greatest national asset. It provides, generates, and distributes all of our electricity. It's under huge stress. And if Eskom goes under, the entire economy goes under, including all of workers' pensions, which are invested in the stock market. So we have to find a solution.
Yeah.
When we expect the peak of load shedding before Corona, the economy was losing about 13 billion rand every single day. And that was threatening hundreds of thousands of jobs in the mining sector, manufacturing, but in fact all jobs, because every part of our life is based upon electricity. Government doesn't on its own have the capacity to resolve it. Business on its own can't solve it. So it's about all of us coming together. So the Eskom Social Compact, it really is a high-level plan to fix Eskom. Not just the debt, but we have to tackle the corruption, the wasteful expenditure, the bloated management, some of the corrupt and very onerous contracts from the private sector to Eskom. So it really is a 35-point plan. We're quite confident it can make things turn around. But we're not saying that pension money must be chucked at Eskom. The PIC, which invests workers' money in the state, has already invested about 104 billion rand in Eskom through government bonds. Those are guaranteed by government. They've always returned a healthy return on interest. In fact, they've actually been more profitable for workers' pension funds and insurance funds than investing in the private sector. So we're saying, let's look at those kind of options. But again, it can't be workers alone who carry the burden as always. Government must contribute to paying off Eskom's debt. Municipalities, departments must pay Eskom's debt. Communities must pay Eskom's debt. Everybody must pay. So it's about solving a national problem together.
Yeah.
We've developed this plan, it's COSATU, but now government and Eskom must implement it and be held accountable.
I mean, as you talk about the importance of Eskom to all of us, given the hammering our economy has taken this year as well, we can't attract any new investment if we can't keep the lights on either. But what is the concern from workers here? There is a sense, if you speak to people on the ground, that workers are once again expected here to bear the brunt of corruption they had nothing to do with.
No, sure. And look, also, to be honest with you, we didn't want to wait until it's too late. We didn't want to come to a stage where Eskom collapsed like SAA or SABC or Denel, etc. We wanted to be proactive and to intervene whilst we had time to fix the situation. You remember there was also mentioned last year of retrenching workers at Eskom. So as a trade union, we cannot afford for any worker to lose their job, both at Eskom and in the broader economy at large. So we have to be proactive to find the solutions. But for us, there's no blank checks. We're not going to give Eskom a single cent. We will support the PIC if it chooses to do so, to invest in government bonds in Eskom, because we know those return an interest, a profit to the pension funds. There's not a blank check.
Yeah.
But it's more affordable for Eskom to do it that way than to pay extremely expensive with high interest rate charges debt to private sector, to the banks, etc. So it's not a blank check. We're not handing over money. There'll be a healthy return because we need to make sure our pensioners' money is safe, our workers' money is safe. And that's why we also said that there can be no assistance to Eskom unless they deal with the corruption, with the wasteful expenditure, with the bleeding. You can't assist somebody if they continue to bleed. So it's about cleaning it up. We know what are exactly the problems. We can stop the bleeding. Then we can assist them to get back into the feet. And to actually, energy should actually be a growth sector for the economy. It should be creating jobs, creating income, boosting exports. It shouldn't be the obstacle to economic growth. So we have to fix it. And we're quite confident we can do so. But look, this is just a high-level plan. The PIC, government, all of them will have to do the number crunching. They have to present what is it, how will it make sense, what are the financial guarantees, so we can proceed and go forward.
Yeah, but I mean, essentially what you're saying is, government will use the money to bring down Eskom's debt in the form of government bonds. Government bonds themselves are invested at a really, really good return. So the risk for workers is minimal, if anything at all.
In fact, there's no risk for workers because those bonds that we invest in government, 104 billion rand currently, they're guaranteed by the state. So unless the state collapses and goes belly up, there'll be a guaranteed return. When you invest in the private sector, there's no guarantee. If your investments in the stock market and a company collapse, if the share price goes down, it's tough luck. You remember when Nhlanhla Nene was fired as Minister of Finance? workers lost about 500 billion rand on the stock market, both private and public sector pension funds, because there is no guarantee in the private sector.
Yeah.
Government bonds, you have a guarantee. And it's also at a more affordable rate for Eskom. But also, look, it's not just about workers carrying the burden, as you said. Government has to contribute cash to Eskom to ease the debt burden. The other developmental financial institutions like the Development Bank, the IDC must also contribute. The private sector, especially the banks, must also contribute and invest in government bonds. And in fact, we would want to see the political office bearers, the politicians' pension fund, also being invested here, because we must all have some skin in the game to minimize the risk, to carry the burden as well. The other thing is that Eskom, about a third of its generation capacity is coming off grid this decade. It doesn't have much money to invest in additional generation. There's a huge amount of very attractive international green energy funding, which will also assist Eskom to reduce its debt burden. They structure in that way so that it incentivizes that, but they will also provide cash to allow Eskom to invest in additional energy capacity, again, which is going to help us to avoid load shedding as the economy picks up and we recover and so forth.
Yeah, and of course, that condition about no workers being retrenched as part of Eskom's restructuring, that is also a big selling point, shall we call it. Matthew, thanks very much for your time this morning on the AM Report. Matthew Parks is COSATU's Parliamentary Coordinator from Cape Town.